So Morgan Tilbrook starting from pole position. James Wallace alongside. So it's McLaren from Mercedes, the first two rows of the grid. The safety car peels its way into the pit lane, and the final race of the weekend for the GT Cup Championship is about to get underway here at Donington Park. It looks as though it's a good start from both men on the front row of the grid, but Morgan Tilbrook just has his nose ahead as they head up towards Redgate Corner. James Wallace is going to try and sweep around the outside and keep Lucky Kira at bay, and it looks as though with a little bit of curb being used by, I think, Gilbert Yates in the Lamborghini on the exit of Redgate Corner, which got a little bit squirrely for a moment. They are all safely through at least the first turn and plunge their way downhill in towards the old hairpin for the first time. Morgan Tilbrook leading the way. Remember, that car won the race yesterday in the pit stop race, so that means it has picked up an extra 20 success seconds for this one, on top of the extra penalty that you pick up when you've got the pro alongside you, which is Marcus Clutton, who is scheduled to take over that car for part 2 of the race. Nice to see Simon Orange has indeed made it out. I just saw the number 67 McLaren flashing through shot there. That's the blue car with the orange flashes, just again going through shot there at Coppice Corner. So brilliant work done by Jason Hughes and the Team Orange, powered by JMH team, to get that car repaired after it tripped into the pit wall yesterday. It was damaged at the front. They got a broken gearbox, but they've worked until reasonably late at night. Parts arrived even this morning, and they've been making sure they could try and get the car out at some point this weekend. But for the defending champion, it's been a tough old weekend so far. Now, Lucky Kira is trying to go all the way around the outside of Ian Logie there, and just about made it stick by the look of things. They are still side by side on towards the top of the Craner curves, and yet Lucky Kira goes through. Ian Logie down into 4th position. He's got Graham Tilley right behind him, and then Sasha Kakad thereafter. The Audi looking to try and make progress, the Audi GT3. So lap number 2 up towards McLean's Corner. Not the highest point of the circuit, because it just climb a tiny bit more up towards Coppice Corner, which is where they're heading now. This is the highest point on the Donington Park National Circuit, and from there get on the throttle, get a good exit coming off the corner. It's key to carry then all of that momentum along the straight and down in towards the braking area for the Robert Chicane, which is where our leading pair are going currently. There's the car of Ian Logie at the front of that little trio. At the back of the trio is the ex-Balf Motorsport Audi. And we've had a change for the lead. James Wallace has gone through. He got a better run coming out of Roberts. And James Wallace, driving solo here this weekend, has gone through to pick up the lead of the race from Morgan Tilbrook. So it's Mercedes that leads. The DriveTac, powered by Track Focus Mercedes, picks up the lead from the Enduro Motorsport McLaren as they head through the old hairpin on what is lap number 3. And James Wallace on the first flying lap, fastest man out there, straight away into the 1 minute 5s. 1 minute 5.199 is the early fastest lap of the race we've had so far. Now, James Wallace was scheduled to share with Sam Mayer-Lockman over the course of this weekend, but they've changed their approach for GT Cup, and potentially that might be a change for the season. James might be driving solo for the rest of the year. Graham Tilley's still got his hands rather full. He leads Group GTO in the early stages at the wheel of his Mercedes, so it might look like a GT3 car. It is, but they've put it into GTO, so they've removed all of the air restrictors from it. It's affected the weight of the car as well, because they've been able to change the weight of this car, so it is a GT3 car, but it's not running to GT3 specification, so it drops into Group GTO, the car with the Dayglow yellow flashes. Now, Ian Logie, reigning British GT champion, under the cosh here from Graham Tilley. Sasha Kakad not that further back. Morgan Short going well in the Group GTO Mosler. And that Brabham there, the BT62 in the hands of Paul Bailey, is going to be 3rd in Group GTO at the moment. And we'll have the Group GTC leading car of Gilbert Yates in the number 11 Lamborghini right behind it. The early leader in Group GTH, the Aston Martin once more, the number 82 Feathers Motorsport car in the hands of James Guess. But of course, just because you've got the pace this stage of the race, you still need to look at how long cars are going to be stationary. And that certainly has an effect on potentially what position you might be in when you hand the car over to your respective co-driver and come out of the pit lane. If you've got a pro with you, you'll be stopping for longer. If you're sharing the car with a pro sporting, slightly less. If it's an AMAN combination, a sporting combination, even shorter pit stop for you. So, in and out of the Robert Chicane they will go. Nice to see the light blue Lamborghini back out. There's the leader of Group GT8, so that's James Guest, the Feathers Motorsport Aston Martin leading the group. But look in his mirrors, and Charles Dawson for Ram Racing at the wheel of the black Mercedes with its green flashes is not going away. And trying to get in on the mix is Russ Lindsay at the wheel of his Porsche that runs in Group GTC. So he splits the pack in Group GTH at this stage. Russ, who's having his first weekend of racing in this Porsche, as we heard from just before the start of the race. That is going to be rather pleased, James Guest, because having a different group car behind him just allows him to have a little bit of a safety net. So out of Redgate Corner, through Hollywood, down through the Craner curves, they will plunge. They're on at the moment lap number 5. Now, since taking the lead of the race, James Wallace has gone even quicker now, 1 minute 4.208 from him. Not quite as quick as the 1 minute 3s that we've been chalking up so far, but we'll get there. It was 1 minute 3.3 in yesterday's first race, 1 minute 3.2 in the second, and 1 minute 3.4 in the third, with the fastest laps in each of those races for the Group GT3 specification cars. And this time through, Lucky Keir in third place sets the fastest lap, 1 minute 3.988 from him. But for James Wallace, he has disappeared another 1/10 of a second up the road from the number 77 McLaren. There goes Lucky Keir in third place, having just set that fastest lap of the race, the Raid Lab machine. Lucky, who we saw out racing Ferraris for the last few years. He was double champion, I think, now in the Ferrari Challenge UK, having finished runner-up in a previous year, but switches over to a McLaren for this year and is running the full season in GT Cup. Are we going to have a change for the lead of Group GTH? No, James Guest having to go rather defensive to keep Charles Dawson behind. But it's still Aston Martin from Mercedes, and the McLaren of Philip Carter isn't too far adrift as well now, as he sits there in what will be third position in Group GTH. And just off them, I think, will be the car that's fourth in Group GTH, and that will be Tim Docker at the wheel of another McLaren 570S. So it's Feathers Motorsport from Ram Racing, from Greystone GT, first, second and third in Group GTH, and then the Paddock Motorsport machine in the hands of Tim Docker shortly thereafter. But a good little squabble this is, as it heads round through McLean's Corner and up towards Coppice. Group GTH, I've said for the last couple of seasons, I think is the most competitive group. In qualifying yesterday, there were 6 cars at one point separated by thousandths of a second. And again here, you know, whether it be a front-engined Aston Martin, whether it be the front-engined Mercedes, the rear-engined McLaren, all of the cars in the hands of these particular drivers at this moment are absolutely evenly matched. James Guest then a little bit slower coming out of Roberts, as he was last time, which gave Charles Dawson the opportunity to draw alongside. This time Charles Dawson is trying the outside line to see whether he can switch back on the exit of the corner, get a bit more momentum coming off, but certainly James Guest will be wise to that. Down through the Craner curves goes James. Didn't do a great deal, if any, racing last year. We've seen him racing Porsches in the past. We've seen him racing Radical SR1s in the past. We've seen him racing Citroen C1s in the past in the 24-hour races as James Guest. But this Aston Martin has gone really well in his hands over the course of this weekend. I think he's going to be desperate to try and hang on to another race win. When that car comes into the pit lane, it'll be stationary for 105 seconds before Tom Canning can take over. However, for Charles Dawson, if he can stick with the task in hand here, that Mercedes, when Charles Dawson gives way to Seb Morris, that car will stop for 5 seconds less. Because James Guest and Tom Canning won their group yesterday, so they pick up 20 success seconds. Charles Dawson and Seb Morris finished second in their group, so they pick up 15 seconds. So that could be the difference. So for Charles Dawson, the task will be stick with that race leader. Even if you don't get past the group leader, James Guest, you're on his coattails, you'll have a really good chance of being able to pit them. But the car that's probably in the best position of all of those, you could argue, might be Phil Carter behind, because he will only be stationary for 85 seconds when he hands over to Michael Broadhurst. And then, of course, behind that, we've got another car as well, which is going to be Tim Docker giving way to Gordy Much. That will only be stationary for 80 seconds. So that's why I'm saying the whole dynamic of this race can change around in the pit stops depending on the driver pairing and how you got on in yesterday's pit stop race. That will dictate how long you spend in the pit lane. So up towards McLean's Corner, James Guest still working overtime to try and keep the car ahead. He's running 15th place overall, but leading Group GTH, which caters for those cars that are compliant and built to GT4 specification. So you could run them, say, not just in this, in the British GT Championship, you could run them in European Championships. GT4 is very much a global formula and was introduced as Group GTH, the H standing for homologation, into the GT Cup a few seasons ago now. Over the start-finish line they'll go. James Guest still hanging on to the place. Russ Lindsay started to disappear up the road. And look in the background, the overall race leaders are coming now as well. And Charles Dawson dives for the inside of James Guest. James Guest is going to have to give way here. The Mercedes pushes the Aston Martin out a little bit wide, heading through the exit of Redgate Corner, as you would expect. But James Guest is sticking with it. Eventually, though, he has to yield and tucks in behind the Ram Racing Merc. So it's Mercedes now that leads Group GTH from Aston Martin, and then the pair of McLarens behind, the first of which is the Greystone car in the hands of Philip Carter, the next of which is the Paddock Motorsport machine in the hands of Tim Docker. And all of these cars are about to be gobbled up by our overall race leader, which is James Wallace, who is only 1 second to the good from the overall second place car in the hands of Morgan Tilbrook. So the race leader can't afford to be held up, particularly through the traffic that he's trying to wiggle his way through and past. So, first pit window opens when there are 26 minutes of the race remaining, so we're a while away yet before we'll see any cars diving for the pit lane. Remember, it's all those cars in Group GTH that will be the first to pit. James Wallace is being very, very keen and aggressive almost to get through the back markers. Thankfully, Charles Dawson saw him coming there, but Charles Dawson had his exit compromised coming out of Roberts, and that might allow the Aston Martin of James Guest to draw himself back alongside. Morgan Tilbrook, I think, was the gainer through the traffic there, which means that the lead advantage is now down to just about half a second between first and second. And James Guest this time is trying to retake the lead of Group GTH. He's side by side with Charles Dawson in the Mercedes. Charles Dawson is going to lose the lead of the race, but then sneaks his way back up the inside of James Guest, heading in towards the old hairpin. James Guest now in danger of dropping not just from the lead of Group GTH down to second, but also down to third if Philip Carter can unlock the door. And all of this is just allowing the next McLaren in the background in the hands of Tim Docker to close in at the wheel of the number 78 McLaren. So up towards Coppice Corner. Race leader has already completed 10 laps, is about to very shortly complete the 11th lap of the race. Top four in Group GTH now needing to watch their mirrors because they've got the car of Lucky Kira trying to squeeze its way through. The McLaren should be able to get past one car, but can't get past James Guest's Aston Martin before the Robert chicane. But in a straight line, should easily pick that off the extra power of the GT3 car against the GT4s. And then, having gained a position over one Group GTH car, he'll also dive his way up the inside of Charles Dawson at the wheel of the Group GTH leading Ram Racing Mercedes. So down through the Craner curves yet again they will go. Every time you have one little bit of traffic overtake you, it just briefly stops the squabble, but shortly then there's another car coming up. It will be Ian Loggy will be the next car to pick these off. Then it was Sasha Kakad at the wheel of the Audi that will want to squeeze his way through, but for the moment, the battle can resume for the lead of Group GTH. Nose dives again on Charles Dawson's car. Charles will be doing a good chunk of the European GT4 Championship this year, as well as hopefully doing a full season in GT Cup, we hope. James Guest is in for the full season in the Feathers Motorsports Aston Martin, partnered up with Tom Canning, who's what, in his early 20s now, Tom, but first started racing GT4 cars when he was very much a teenager, only 16 years of age. And Tom is a junior factory driver for Aston Martin. There's number 14, Phil Carter. He still sits there where he needs to be. Now, we've had the change for the lead of Group GTO, so brilliant stuff. It looks as though Morgan Short at the wheel of the white Mosler, the MT900, has through and has taken a place away from Graham Tilley. This is for the lead of Group GTO for the open specification cars, and the Mosler that has had a few little mechanical woes over the course of the weekend with HT leads breaking down, and that was the white reason it retired in the race earlier on, as well as yesterday. For the moment, touch wood, it's going well in the hands of Morgan Short, who will hand the car over to his brother Marcus from the pit window. Now they'll be flashing their lights and trying to weave their way through and past the Group GTH cars. It is so good to see a Mosler back in the championship. Warren Mosler, who has got very close links to the Short family. Martin Short, the father, no doubt will be posting things on social media so that Warren can pick up on just what's happening with the car out there over the course of this weekend. And for the moment, we also need to keep an eye on what's happening from the back of the grid, because the number 67 Orange Racing, powered by JMH McLaren of Simon Orange, has worked its way beautifully up through the order. It started 24th. Simon has had no real running in this car following its problem in qualifying, and then the fact that he had an incident which put him into the pit wall yesterday, but brilliant work by the team have meant that it's been in the garage all day being worked on and repaired, and now the number 67 McLaren is threading its way through the traffic from the tail end of the field in the hands, remember, of the reigning champion from last year. Up the inside of Graham Tilley he goes. Graham sees he's coming, lets him go through, so another place gained for Simon Orange. Now hopefully, we haven't heard that Simon is driving solo, but Tom Roach was scheduled to be sharing the car over the course of the weekend. I did bump into Tom earlier on, Tom Roach, and he did say he was heading for home, but that was probably because at the time they weren't entirely sure whether they could get the car repaired or not, but we'll have to, I think, just double check as to whether that is solo or not. Maybe from the pit window, Piers will be able to position himself in that part of the pit lane, or amber, and work out whether there's a driver change or not and relay it to me. I'm expecting there to be a driver change because that's what I've heard, but so the flip side of that is that Tom Roach said he was going home earlier. Right, we've had a change there. That is Ian Loggy now at the wheel of the number 76 McLaren that has lost the place to the Audi. So through has gone Sasha Kakad at the wheel of the Audi. That will put Sasha up into 4th in the race overall now, and that will be 4th in Group GT3. Ian Loggy dropping down into 5th place, handing the car over to Casper Stevenson later on. But that is a car that had a few problems yesterday, and that will remain stationary for 80 seconds off, and I'm afraid that is the 24/7 Mercedes that is off, a long, long way into the gravel trap. And that was a car that was, I believe, scheduled to be started by David Franklin. Ed Bridle should be taking over that car come the pit window, but it's beached in the gravel at the moment, going nowhere, I'm afraid. So we've got 33 minutes of the race remaining, so we've already had 17 minutes of the race. Simon Orange at the wheel of the McLaren is about to squeeze his way through and past Russ Lindsay. So those are two teammates, but running different groups. Russ in the Group GTC Porsche, letting the Group GT3 McLaren go by. Graham Tilley now also trying to pick off the Porsche. And as they head up towards the start-finish line, it looks so brilliant work by the marshals. There's just enough motive power to get the Mercedes out of the gravel trap and where it came to rest at the old hairpin, but then all of a sudden now the car just slows and falters and digs its way into the gravel. So they did their very best to get it out of harm's way, but unfortunately just lost a little bit of momentum as it got towards the very edge of the gravel, and that car now stricken there may well need the assistance of one of the telehandlers to come out and drag it out of harm's way. Now whether that will be done by localised yellows or under safety car is for race control to decide. The charge for Simon Orange is still going well. He's in 7th position now, could be inside the top 6. He's got the Mosler to try and work his way through and past though. Morgan Short is not going to make it easy. Mosler might also just be conscious that it leads its group, so if it lets a Group GT3 car through, yes, it will lose an overall position in the race, but it won't lose any championship points. The difficulty is that it doesn't lead Group GTO by a great deal, because the red and day-glow yellow Mercedes of Graham Tilley is the next car in Group GTO. So for Morgan Short, he can't really afford to blend out of the throttle to let the McLaren through. So Simon Orange might have to do it on pure pace here. He won't be able to do it down through the Craner curves though, because we've got the localised yellows at the moment because of that stricken Mercedes in the gravel. So they all have to back off the throttle, turn their way through the old hairpin, and then when you get to the green flag on the exit, then you can get back on the gas fully again and try and press on. So 17 laps completed by our race leader. Lead advantage between James Wallace and Morgan Tilbrook was exactly 3.5 seconds last time through. 3.500 to the nearest thousandth of a second between the pair of them. Lucky Keir in 3rd place is 12.5 seconds adrift now. And this battle that we're looking for is for 6th, 7th and 8th places. And the meat in the sandwich is the Group GT3 McLaren of Simon Orange. He's got Group GTO Moser ahead of him. He's got a Group GTO Mercedes sitting behind in the hands of Graham Tilley. It's a busy section of the race here for Sasha Kakad. He's trying to get past Doc Bush's Porsche. Doc Bush's Porsche equally as much as involved in its own little squabble towards the positions just outside of the top 20, with the Audi R8 in the hands of Chris Murphy. Now Sasha Kakad is through and ahead of Doc Bush. Ian Loggy will look to try and wiggle his way through if he can. He'll have to wait until the exit of McLean's corner to do that. The telehandler is dragging the stricken 24/7 Mercedes out of harm's way. So they'll drag it all the way through the gravel. And then whether it will be allowed to continue in the race or not, or just positioned up against the barriers down there at the old hairpin, we'll have to wait and see. And we're also now not that far away from the pit window opening. So for cars in Group GTH, then it's about 4 minutes before the pit window will open. So 26 minutes remaining on the race is when the first of the pit window opens. So 30 minutes remain on the clock. Paul Bailey running in 9th position at the moment at the wheel of the V8 Ford engined Brabham BT62, which sounds absolutely fantastic, the noise that thing makes. 3rd in Group GTO he is. Our race leader James Wallace though threads his way up towards the start very shortly, what will be the 20th lap for him. So he's on lap number 19. David Franklin is off on his merry way once more. Rather grassy Pirelli tyres and muddy Pirelli tyres that will need cleaning up a little bit. But at least he's in the race, albeit several laps lost, I'm afraid. So through Redgate Corner goes our race leader, the drive tack with track-focused Mercedes leading the way in the hands of the teenager. Down through the Craner curves. He will go up towards Coppice Corner. We will see the Brabham make its way. David Franklin still crawling his way back towards the pit lane, but trying to stay out of people's way as well, and just making sure he tries to stay off the line, as that Mercedes is no doubt depositing lots of gravel around the track following its off. We've now got, what, a couple of minutes really before we start to see the pit window open. It's only the cars in Group GTH that can pit. They will pit between the 24th and 29th minute of the race, so when there's 26 to 21 to go. And for all the cars running at the front of the race, including our race leader here, who heads up towards the conclusion of lap number 20. So if you're in Group GT3, Group GTO and Group GTC, you have to wait. You have to wait until there's just 21 minutes to go, is the earliest you can come into the pits. But you have to have conducted your pit stop before there are just 14 minutes remaining. So 2 separate pit windows. And that's done for safety. That was introduced a couple of seasons ago now, where it just means that when you've got really full grids of cars, everybody doesn't descend into the pit lane at one time. You've got 2 separate windows. So when the window opens for one, the others can't come in. When it closes for the first batch, it opens for the second. So it evens out, and it means that whilst it's still never safe working in the pit lane, it is safer when you haven't got everybody coming in at the same time. So for James Wallace, through and past for the second time the Group GTH James Guest driven Aston Martin, which is running still second in the group. Charles Dawson with that fantastic overtake that he made, picking up the lead of the group a while ago, and has pulled away from that Aston Martin now, and has disappeared, what, the best part of 3-4 seconds up the road really, at the wheel of his Mercedes from that Aston. Big wiggle from James Wallace, so he's pushing hard still is James, flashing his lights. This is the Group GTH Mercedes that he's about to work his way through and past. Charles Dawson, did he see him coming there? I think probably at the last minute just saw the race leader trying to work his way through and up the inside. That's the Paddock Motorsport, number 78. McLaren, Tim Docker sharing that car with Gordy Much. Gordy moving over from the Praga Cup, where he was the champion last year, partnered up with Jimmy Broadbent to secure that championship, but moving over to GT Cup for this year. And the McLaren, having previously raced in things like Ginetta GT5's Gordy, where he was 3rd in that championship a couple of seasons ago, so he'll be taking over that car from Tim Docker shortly. How shortly, though, we'll have to wait and see, because the pit window is now about 30 seconds away for opening for the Group GTH cars. If we had Group GTB and Group GTA cars in the championship this weekend, it would also be open for them, but in the batch of cars at pit first, it's all Group GTH this weekend. So it's only one class of car or group of car that'll be diving for the pit lane in, well, probably not this lap. They might have to wait until the lap after, because I don't think the window is quite going to be open. Or it might be. Let's have a quick look. We've got, all right, so in they come. Yep, so we've got a few cars coming in, including the Mosler, which is pitting outside of the window. So that must mean, I'm afraid, there are more mechanical woes for the National Motorsport Academy Mosler, which has had brilliant pace this weekend, but has been slightly troubled in terms of mechanical issues. So the window is open, cars already diving their way for the pit lane. likes of the Cup class cars, those in Group GTC, whether it be the Lamborghini or the Porsches or the Sol Ferrari that we've got in the hands of the Dizils. They can't pit as yet. They've got to wait for a few more minutes before they can thread their way into the pit lane, and this is the car that leads Group GTC, so Gilbert Yates has done a really, really good job at the wheel of the number 11 Blackthorn Motorsport Lamborghini Super Trofeo. They secured a win earlier on in the sprint race at the wheel of that car. They had trouble yesterday and posted a non-finish in the first race and then a non-start in the second, as did this car here. This had trouble yesterday with what was a rear hub failure on the number 63 McLaren. That is Mark Havers about to jump out. Max Hart, who is a TCR driver, also raced in single-seaters for a period of time, about to jump into that car as well. New team, new driver pairing, not raced sports cars before, and talking to Max, he did say they've still got some work to do. We know that there's time in the car, we know that there's time in us as drivers, and we also know that we're going to have to work our socks off to try and be as competitive we can in what is a very competitive Group GTH for the GT4 spec cars. You can see a big old scuff to the front right corner of that car where it's clearly got a little bit too close for comfort and off, and I'm afraid that's a spin. That's Charlotte Gilbert. That looks as though that is the inside of Coppice where she's had a spin, so must have lost the car on the way into Coppice corner, and it's spun quite bizarrely onto the infield there, so she's going to try and fire it up, but that ground there goes uphill a little bit, and it was very wet on Friday, so how much traction she's going to get going uphill on slick tyres with what is a very low ground clearance on a Lamborghini, we can only wait and see. Best bet might be to try and hook reverse in it, reverse slightly, and see whether she can move the car out of harm's way. But for the moment, the Lamborghini, I think, is struggling for traction, and the difficult thing will be, if she can't get it moving, she is in danger of having clutch issues with that car, maybe overheating the clutch if she can't get the car rolling again. There we go, brilliant stuff. So great stuff by Charlotte. She gets it going. It would have been very difficult to know when you could get back onto the track there, because it's a blind entry to the corner, so I would imagine she was probably frantically waiting for the marshals to give her an indication that the track was clear to pull back in. So into the pit lane we saw a raft of the Group GTH cars come in, and I think Piers Pryor has managed to catch up with one of the drivers down there. Who have you got, Piers?
I've got Mark Havers down here, of course GTH runner. That car, I mean, it looked like a great race out there. A few little scuffs and marks on the car there, sign of a good race.
Yeah, a few battle wounds, but very enjoyable.
Very enjoyable indeed. And how did you feel like the car was going? Are you happy with the race so far?
Amazing, very exciting. It's my first sort of baptism for this sort of racing. So normally TCR or British Endurance, but this is very intense.
Very intense indeed. You enjoying the GT Cup so far then?
Absolutely.
And how do you think Max is going to get on in the second half of the stint?
Very well. He's fired up, ready to go.
I could see him standing there jumping about before you got, and you couldn't see that, but he was ready to go and ready and ready to go. I'm sure we'll keep an eye on Max, but great to hear from you, Mark. Thanks very much. We'll see you at the next round.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, Mark. Back to you in the comments box, Mark.
Thanks, Piers. Yeah, good to catch up with some drivers down there in the pit lane. The pit window is about to slam shut for the Group GTH cars, but I think matters not. They've all been into the pit lane and conducted their pit stops. However, the pit window will be opening very shortly, in exactly 60 seconds time, for the rest of the field. So Paul Bailey at the wheel of his Brabham BT62 may well be in at the end of this lap, because I think the pit window will be open for him as he comes over the start finish line next time through, and that being the case, it will be the Scotsman Ross Wiley, who became a father recently and a few years ago won the British GT Championship in the GT4 category. He will be jumping on board that car. Ross and Paul have been partnered up for a season or so now, whether it be in this Brabham, or we also saw them out in a McLaren last year as well. So Paul is just heading up towards the right-hander at McLean's corner, pressing on, seeing what he might be able to wring out of the neck of the car. He was the Group GTO champion in 2021. He also won the Group GTC championship in GT Cup in 2018 and 2016. He was also Group GTO champion back in 2015 as well. We've seen him out in British GT and Blancpain and Supercar Challenge, a raft of things in the past, Paul, but he's driving for the day, and the weekend is very shortly about to come to a halt, because I would imagine he'll be wiggling his way into the pit lane. Lucky Kera will also be handing the car over very, very shortly to his respective pro, which is going to be Ewan Hankey, who knows McLaren's inside and out with the amount of miles he's punched into race cars over the years and developing them for McLaren as well. So sneaks up the inside of Tom Canning at the wheel of the Aston Martin, who's taken over from James Guess in the Feathers Motorsport car. And as a result of the fact that they've had to stop for a longer period of time in that Aston Martin, they're currently running 5th in Group GTH. So into the pit lane will come Lucky Kira, one would imagine, and that car will remain stationary for 100 seconds when he hands it over. We've also got Morgan Tilbrook in, ready to hand over to Marcus Clutton. 105 seconds they'll remain stationary. Gilbert Yates is in to hand over to David MacDonald in what was the Group GTC leading Lamborghini, 105 seconds. It looks as though Sasha Kakad is in, ready to hand over the Audi to Hugo Cook. They've only got 90 seconds to remain stationary. We have got Ian Loggy in to hand over to Casper Stevenson, and also Graham Tilley at the wheel of the Mercedes is about to hand that car over to Senan Fielding, who did our onboard lap for us at the top of the show. So all of the cars at the sharp end are in, apart from one at this stage at the sharp end, and that is the race leader, James Wallace. He hasn't got a co-driver to worry about, so he can pit whenever he wants as long as he's inside the window, and also he's found a little bit of clear track last time through. 1 minute 3.574 is now the fastest lap of the race that we've seen so far, and that goes the way of the number 50 car. Dives at the inside of Ed Bridle's Mercedes, having taken over from David Franklin, does James Wallace. Now for James Wallace, driving solo, he is a sporting driver, but because he is so quick, he has agreed to pick up the time penalty in the pit lane as though he was a pro sporting driver. So rather than being stationary for 60 seconds, he has accepted that the right thing to do is for him to remain stationary for 80 seconds. And at the moment, he has not put a wheel wrong. He's also going to be tasked with, for the first time, coming up against the pros, because yesterday that car failed whilst in the lead, just as the pit window had sort of finished. Now, looks as though there's a traffic jam in the pit lane. Marcus Clutton can't get out because Casper Stevenson was blocking him in, and now Casper Stevenson is trying to get the jump on Marcus Clutton. The two McLarens are squeezing each other down the pit lane. There's almost a little bit of contact between the pair of them there. Without question, the Enduro Motorsport car was heavily hampered there. Now, not quite sure who came into the pits first. I think it was the Enduro Motorsport McLaren was in first, and then Ian Loggy, sort of, as he parked the car, would have perhaps not quite realised that it would compromise the exit of the Enduro Motorsport car. But either way, they're both out of the pit lane. The order remains the same, but the Enduro Motorsport car lost time there. No question that it lost time. It couldn't launch itself out of its pit box because it was blocked in by the McLaren ahead, and of course on a race car there's not that much lock really. So straight away Marcus Clutton will try and get on with it. Doc Bush and the Porsche is the next task in hand. Then will be Ed Bridle at the wheel of the 24/7 Mercedes that he'll want to try and weave his way through. Still a few more cars conducting their pit stops at this stage, which includes Graham Dazeal handing over to his son Dan Dazeal. Charlotte Gilbert is in to hand over to Warren Gilbert. Russ Lindsay is in at the wheel of his Porsche. There is Russ now at the wheel of the Porsche. We've also got Matty Evans in to hand over to Kev Clark. Chris Murphy, who will remain behind the wheel of the Audi R8, number 72 car, is also in. So I think the only car that hasn't stopped as yet is the race leader, which is James Wallace, and at the moment, of course, that means that he leads by a country mile. It's showing as being 2 laps that he leads by at this stage. So clock needs to tick down for Russ Lindsay. Someone will be on the stopwatch to understand as to how long that car has been stationary for. Michael Broadhurst now on board the number 14 Greystone GT McLaren 570S. It's the sole Greystone GT car we've got, and for Group GTH at the moment it is going to be the number 69 Mercedes that leads Group GTH, but Piers has managed to catch up with someone from Enduro Motorsport. I'd imagine it's Morgan Tilbrook he's with down in the pit lane.
It is, yes. We've managed to grab away Morgan Tilbrook. Morgan, great stint right at the front there with the AMG. It's just coming in now. A bit of a tasty race in the pit lane there.
Yeah, it was a good race in the pit lane. I think Marcus was in the right. You know, they blocked us, so Marcus wasn't going to have that. And you can see that the cars were starting to pull out, so quite rightly so. He kept his foot in, and he went down the pit lane and got the position back.
Absolutely. I bet you mentioned to me a moment ago that's why he's my pro.
That's exactly why he's my pro.
He doesn't know holds barred.
No, exactly. Marcus gives it everything. You know, he's one of the few pro drivers who's not a factory, but he races the best of them and he competes with the factory drivers. But he's not a factory driver, and I love that. He's the underdog, but he's as good as all of them.
Absolutely. We saw that yesterday, of course. You guys being very, very strong today. You were very strong out there, right on the coattails of James Wallace out there.
Yeah. Do you know what? I wasn't racing James. I was never going to. You know, he's a better driver than me. and I needed to pull a gap on Lucky Kira and Loggy and the Audi. So I decided 2-3 laps in to let James go through, because I knew I'd be faster following him defending. So I let him go on the straight and managed to stay with him for 10 laps. Learned quite a bit actually following him, because he's a great driver, but then I just couldn't quite stay with him at the end. But it was the right move, because it enabled me to get fresh air and play the strategy game, which is the win points.
Well, let's see how Marcus gets on out there. Thank you so much for your time. We'll catch up with you later on. Cheers. Right, up to you back in the comments block, Marcus.
Thanks, Piers. Yeah, always good to catch up with Morgan Tilbrook. I haven't had a chance to have a chat to him over the course of this weekend, but it's always good to hear from Morgan Tilbrook. And he was very honest there as well. He said, James Wallace is a better driver than me. I'm not sure that I entirely agree with that. But what I do agree with, that, yeah, he would have slowed himself up if he was trying to defend. So let the quicker car go through if that's what he deemed it was, and sit on its coattails and see what you can learn. And that's exactly what he has done. What I have also learned recently is that Ross Wiley is flying behind the wheel of the Brabham now that he's taken over from Paul Bailey. Ross has set the fastest race lap we've seen all weekend, 1:02.526 for the Brabham. That's 8th overall and 2nd at the moment in Group GTO. There it goes now, making that fantastic noise. The soundtrack from the Brabham is just something that you ought to bottle, in all honesty, and sell. You'd make great money from it. That car has just set the fastest lap that we've seen all weekend. So it is not leading the group at this stage. It needs to catch up with Senan Fielding at the wheel of the Mercedes. And Senan Fielding is 11 seconds up the road at the moment, so there's work to be done for Ross Wiley, and the first work he needs to do is try and work his way past the Top Cats Racing Lamborghini that's now in the hands of Warren Gilbert. Simon Orange has, I think, handed over to Tom Roach now. Maybe that's something Piers can just clarify for us, as to whether there was a change of car for the number 67 McLaren. So we'll stick with the fact that it is going to be Tom Roach behind the wheel of that car for the moment, until we hear to the contrary. And for Simon Orange, it was a good charge really to work his way through the order. He's got breathing down his neck at the moment, the car of Ewan Hankey that's taken over. So Tom Roach under pressure from Ewan Hankey, then Hugo Cook not too far behind as well, as they thread their way with 13 minutes remaining up towards Coppice Corner. As for group leaders at the moment, James Wallace leads overall, leads Group GT3, Group GTO being led by the number 4 Mercedes of Senan Fielding. Group GTC, it's the Dazils that are leading, so it's the Ferrari that leads Group GTC, the number 19 car now in the hands of Dan Dazil, and leading Group GTH, it is the number 69 Make Happen Racing Mercedes that was started by Stephen Walton. It's now in the hands of Chris Hart, but remember, that's an am-am combination. They've got all the pros going to gang up on them. They only stopped for 60 seconds compared to other cars in their group, which stopped for a lot longer. But they are now getting caught by some of the quicker guys behind. How much time have they got? They've got 2.5 seconds in hand between themselves and Gordy Much, who's a pro sporting, and then all the pros going even quicker thereafter. So that could be a good one to watch out as to how it all plays out in Group GTH. For the meantime, though, down through the old hairpin goes Tom Roach in 4th, Ewan Hankey in 5th, Hugo Cook there in 6th place. So this is for 4th, 5th, 6th overall, as well as 4th, 5th and 6th in the group. And for Hugo Cook, he has unpicked Ewan Hankey there, and that is not an easy thing to do. So the Audi goes through and ahead of the first of the McLarens. It will want to try and sneak its way through and past the second of them, which is the Orange Racing powered by JMH car, which is in the hands, I believe, of Tom Roach. Now has Hugo Cook got the grunt to try and squeeze his way through in the Audi? No, very evenly matched. Can't do anything about it, and if anything, from trying it on the way into the Robert chicane, he's slightly compromised his exit and now might have to go defensive to try and keep Ewan Hankey behind. So you can see now, right, the door's open on the Lamborghini there. It's clobbered something. There's lots of damage to that door, and quite what it has clonked, I don't know, but David MacDonald is going to have his hands rather full there. The officials spot that. He could get a black and orange flag, and if he can open it and slam it closed, it might be all right. But if the catch is broken, he's going to either have to keep it closed with one hand, which is a bit difficult when it's paddle shift, or he's going to have to come into the pit lane and they'll have to gaffer tape the thing up. So let's just have a quick look. Goes down towards the old hairpin, door opens, comes back out of the corner. In fact, it's already got gaffer tape on it, has it? So I think the gaffer tape might have come off. That might be the problem. Now, if that's the case, David MacDonald might have to dive for the pit lane before too much longer. That car is running 4th in Group GTC currently, trying to catch up with Kev Clark in the light blue Lamborghini ahead, squeezes its way through. You can see, yeah, that door is open. And know that in some of the GT cars nowadays we have air conditioning in them, but that's not quite the kind of air conditioning that ideally we want. 10 minutes remain. Here is our Group GTC leading Ferrari heading in towards the Robert chicane, the De Ziels. But in the meantime, back to the squabble for 4th, 5th and 6th position. Tom Roach, Hugo Cook, then the car of Ewan Hankey, all together with 10 minutes remaining in this final race of the weekend for the GT Cup before we head to Brands Hatch in 4 weeks' time for the next 4 races of the season. The right-hander at Coppice Corner. The race leader is already on his 36th lap of the race. There's traffic just up the road to deal with, and that is Phil Keane, who has taken over the number 96 car that was started by John Curry, the second of the 2 Make Happen Racing Mercedes. Phil, an ex-factory Lamborghini driver, 3 times a runner-up in the British GT Championship, lets him go through. And still McLaren from Audi from McLaren in this squabble for 4th, 5th and 6th position. Now Hugo Cook got a good run coming out of the Robert chicane. Is he going to be able to get the Audi through and ahead of the McLaren? Tom Roach breaks as late as he can, but Hugo Cook switches his way around the outside at Redgate Corner, picks up the place. Brilliant stuff. Up to 4th for the Audi, down to 5th for the Orange Racing, powered by JMH McLaren, that, remember, started 24th on the grid. So, as they head round through the old hairpin, I think, Piers, you've got some news from us from down there in the pits.
Yeah, I just I'm at the JMH, or sorry, the Orange Racing powered by JMH awning, and just checking in. No, Tom Roach is actually in the car. There was a driver change as far as we're aware. So yeah, it's Tom Roach out on circuit, I believe.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so it did confuse me when Tom said he was going to disappear home, but I thought that was because they didn't know whether the car was going to be repaired. So I was expecting a driver change based on the information. So thanks for confirming that, Piers. So Tom Roach having lost out to Hugo Cook. Can Tom Roach now keep the next car behind, which is Ewan Hankey, who seems to have lost pace there all of a sudden? Wasn't there a problem for the number 13 car? That looked like a slow lap there from Ewan Hankey. Let's just have a quick look over the start-finish line. Yes, Tom Roach was a 1 minute 4.5. Ewan Hankey was a 1 minute 6.8. So he lost 2.3 seconds on that lap. Quite why, I'm not entirely sure, because Ewan Hankey doesn't really make mistakes, but there might have been one in there somewhere. Now our race leader, James Wallace, is still wanting to press on through the order. For Group GTH, it's getting tasty as well. Michael Broadhurst at the wheel of the McLaren has got Tom Canning trying to weave his way through. Tom Canning couldn't quite manage to do it earlier on in the lap, but he has got the job done now, and that would have been for position. So up to 4th in Group GTH now goes the Aston Martin. And then the next car that Tom Canning will want to catch is a long, long way up the road, and that is Seb Morris at the wheel of the Mercedes AMG GT4 that he shares with Charles Dawson. So a flash of the lights, it's Max Hart. In fact, that's Max Hart actually. So where has Seb Morris gone? He must have already gone through and ahead, has he? So that is Max Hart at the wheel of the McLaren. Just wondering where Seb Morris was, because he was showing as being 3rd in Group GTH, and that McLaren is 2nd. So this will be 4th position again by the look of things. So down through the Craner curves, in towards the braking area for the old hairpin. Max Hart, fresh out of TCRs into GTs, has got Tom Canning, factory Aston Martin junior driver, running alongside him, and I think he'll be able to go through here, will he? Yep, through goes the Aston Martin. Losing a place goes the McLaren, and from losing one place, might be in danger of losing another, because there's another pro galloping up on Max Hart behind. That will be Michael Broadhurst, who certainly knows the car, knows the team well as well, because he's been racing for Greystone GT in GT Cup for a couple of seasons now. Hugo Cook in the 4th place Audi, trying to weave his way through the traffic as well. Manages to pass all but the Tom Canning driven Aston Martin into towards the braking area for the Robert chicane with 6.5 minutes to go. Ross Wiley has set an even faster lap of the race at the wheel of the Brabham. 1 minute 1.861 now from Ross Wiley. That is going to be something like 112, 113 miles an hour as an average around this circuit. Staggering speed and performance from the Brabham, and brilliant, brilliant driving from Ross Wiley to wrestle that brutish machine around the track. Whilst our race leader still diving his way through the traffic. James Wallace is on lap number 40 at the moment. We had a slightly disjointed race yesterday with red flags and safety cars. We've got green all of the way today, which is exactly what we want really, because it gives the pros the opportunity to try and catch up that deficit that exists. The Brabham, which is still not leading its group despite the fast times from Ross Wiley. He's still 7.25 seconds down the road from the Group GTO leading number 4 Mercedes in the hands of Sen and Fielding. So Ross Wiley is driving the wheels off the thing, and he's got to, because there's only 5 minutes to go and he's got to try and make up 7 seconds. How much quicker was he than the Mercedes last time through? The answer is still only 0.4 of a second. So flashing its light is that red Mercedes with the day glow to it. Sen and Fielding leading the group. And at the other end of the start-finish line is where we see the Brabham. So Sen and Fielding is looking reasonably comfortable, I would say. 2 McLarens still together. Tom Roach still keeping Ewan Hankey at bay. Tom, who hasn't raced a GT3 car for a huge number of years. I was checking with him on Friday. I said, when was the last time you raced a GT3 car? Was it when you raced the original Audi R8 in British GT briefly? And he said, yes, Mark, absolutely. It was a long time ago he'd last jumped into a GT3 car and raced it. Well, you wouldn't know based on the performance at the moment, because he is keeping very much a McLaren stalwart. Ewan Hankey behind him at this stage. 4 minutes to go. There goes Casper Stevenson, sharing with Ian Loggie over the course of this weekend in the Team 76, number 76 McLaren, as it plunges its way downhill through the Craner curves. It's been a beautiful day here at Donington Park. You see the sun still glinting off the cars. Marcus Clutton threading his way through the traffic into the pit lane. Right, has finally come in. I thought it would have to come in. So David MacDonald brings the Blackthorn Motorsport Lamborghini into the pit lane. You can see the big gaffer tape patch that they've put on it to try and keep the door closed, and that is such a shame for them. So any chance of a result in Group GTC is evaporated now. They're surely going to lose 4th in the group to Kev Clark, and maybe 5th in the group to Russ Lindsay, possibly. But at least they're back out in the race. Now Sen and Fielding here at the wheel of the Mercedes has caught up with the Ewan Hankey Tom Roach battle. Now 2 Group GT3 McLarens have got a Group GTO Mercedes behind it, and Sen and Fielding can't really afford to get held up. He's also got the race leader bearing down on him as well. So in towards the braking area for Roberts. There we go. Sen and Fielding should have a little bit more grunt in a straight line now that Mercedes is running in Group GTO. And is he going to get through and past and ahead of Ewan Hankey? No, Ewan Hankey's not letting him. And then, by the look of things there, I think Gordy Much perhaps didn't quite realise that there were a couple of cars coming through and almost turned in there. Just at the last minute, I think, spotted the Mercedes coming through and avoided any contact. So good driving from Gordy just to react to that in what was probably quite last minute in his mirrors. So out of the old hairpin, uphill towards McLean's corner. Still Tom Roach from Ewan Hankey, then Sen and Fielding. What we do need to keep an eye on is also the progress of Ross Wiley. What is the Brabham doing relative to that Mercedes? Because that would be for the lead of Group GTO if the Brabham can catch the Merc. You can hear the Brabham, so you know it's not far away with the noise that it makes. And there it is in the background of the shot as well. So Sen and Fielding wants to get on with this. He tries to draw himself alongside Ewan Hankey. That's not quite going to work. They've also got race leader James Wallace bearing down on them with a couple of minutes to go. Now is James Wallace going to bother trying to thread his way through this traffic? Drive-through penalty. Car number 42 is the information that we're getting from race control. So pitted too early did Charles Dawson when he handed over to Seb Morris. The pit window hadn't quite opened, I'm afraid, so they are going to lose what is 3rd place in Group GTH. Down through the old hairpin. 4th, 5th, 6th, then the race leader, and then 7th place thereafter. In fact, might the Brabham unlap itself here, because it is at the moment behind James Wallace. Bit of a moot point as to how much James Wallace wants to get involved in this, because he's leading by such a country mile. And this will be for the lead of Group GTH now as well. So, looks as though we've still got Chris Hart leading the group at this stage. But Seb Morris goes through to pick up the group lead on the road, does he? No, Gordy Much is leading the group on the road, by the look of things. This will be for 2nd, 3rd and 4th in the group, but Seb Morris might be blissfully unaware, whilst he's just gained the place. They're going to have that drive-through penalty result of stopping too early, so it's going to unravel things slightly. But this is a good little squabble in Group GTH. Tom Canning having to work overtime, should be able to feed his way, the pro driver, through and past Chris Hart. So Aston Martin goes through and ahead of Chris Hart, who loses 2 places on that lap with the pros ganging up on him. But the Make Happen Racing Mercedes should be good not to lose a further place. 30 seconds remaining. I don't think we're going to see Seb Morris come into the pit lane to serve the drive-through penalty, so it might be a post-race sort of time penalty that happens. Now, yes, Ross Wiley has unlapped himself from James Wallace, and I'm not surprised that that's the case, because James Wallace doesn't need to get tangled up trying to overtake cars when he's got a 29, nearly 30-second margin. However, Senan Fielding needs to get on with it at the wheel of the Mercedes, and he's drawing himself alongside Tom Roach at the wheel of the Group GTA Mercedes, and goes through and ahead of Tom Roach. So that's going to be up to 4th for the Mercedes, down to 5th for Tom Roach. 6th now is going to be Ross Wiley at the wheel of the Brabham, but to take the checkered flag and the win, it's going to come James Wallace. James Wallace wins the race, but all of these cars that are fighting over 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th have now got another lap to do as well, because James Wallace eased off and let them back through. That's going to be a win in Group GTH for Gordy Much, just coming over the start-finish line. Looks as though second on the road in Group GTH is going to go the way of Seb Morris and Charles Dawson, but of course that car has a time penalty hanging over it, so we'll have to wait and see once the official results are confirmed later on this evening as to what's going on. But for 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, let's have a quick look what's happening, because at the moment it certainly looks as though they are still involved in that great battle. Group GTC honours are going to go the way of the Ferrari, so the Dazils have had a brilliant weekend, both father and son, Graham and Dan Dazil. They come over the start-finish line to claim top honours in Group GTC and finish in 9th place overall, and the win in Group GTO is going to go the way of Senan Fielding, despite the hard charge from the number 28 Brabham in the hands of Ross Wiley. It's not quite going to be the way that they would like it to finish. It's still a good result, but Senan Fielding and the good driving that he did and the hard work by Graham Tilley in the early stages net them a win in Group GTO and what is 5th position overall in our final race of the weekend here at Donington Park. James Wallace drove faultlessly, and even though he decided it was appropriate that he stayed in the pit lane for what should have been 60 seconds, but for 80 seconds, picking up the Pro Sport penalty, he still won by 26 seconds in the end. So the youngster, I think, has a very bright future ahead of him, the way he's been driving both last year in the GT4 Porsche and in this GT3 Porsche. He's getting plenty of seat time this year, because it's not just this championship that he's driving in, he's driving in the British GT Championship as well. So everybody diving their way in towards the pit lane. Let's confirm the results for you then at this stage, the way that they took the checkered flag, and won't necessarily include any drive-through penalties that might be applied subsequently. James Wallace claimed the win. In 2nd place was Morgan Tilbrook and Marcus Clutton. It was Ian Logie and Casper Stevenson in 3rd place. Sasha Kakeg and Hugo Cook were 4th, ahead of the Group GTO winning car, Graham Tilley and Senan Fielding in 5th place. Paul Bailey and Ross Wiley were there in 6th place, and what a drive from Simon Orange and Tom Roach from the back of the grid to finish in 7th. Lucky Kieran, Ewan Hankey were 8th, ahead of the father and son pairing of Graham and Dan Dazil, who won Group GTC, finishing in 9th place overall in their Ferrari, and it was Charlotte and Warren Gilbert that completed the top 10. Just outside of the top 10, it was Matty Evans and Kev Clark who were there in 11th place, and Tim Docker and Gordy Much claimed top honours in Group GTH as they finished in the McLaren in 12th position. Russ Lindsay was there in 13th, ahead of Charles Dawson and Seb Morris in 14th. James Guess and Tom Canning ahead of Stephen Walton and Chris Hart, with Phil Carter and Michael Broadhurst in 17th, ahead of Gilbert Yates and David MacDonald, who had to pit, of course, for the door on their Lamborghini to be sorted, finishing in 18th place. John Curry and Phil Keane were 19th, and Doc Bush was there in 20th position. And then just outside of the top 20 was Chris Murphy, ahead of Mark Havers and Max Hart, David Franklin and Ed Bridle. And the sole retirement was unfortunately the Short brothers, that being Morgan and Marcus Short with their Mosler. And that is the results for our final race of the GT Cup Championship here at Donington Park.